Is this live yet? Ah. Hello coders and welcome to another How to Code Well live coding stream. We're going to continue on building the PHP OOP object-oriented programming framework that we're building for the invoicing application that I'm doing for a course for FreeCodeCamp. So FreeCodeCamp would like me to build an OOP PHP course, and I've decided to do it with 0 frameworks. And before we even get to the invoicing application, we need to build out the framework for the invoice application to work upon. The framework has 2 major components. The first one being the routing, and then the second one has the ORM layer, if you will. This is the object relational map. This will create the entities that relate to the records, the database, the schema of that data for the invoicing app. Once those 2 components are complete, we will then build out the invoicing app. Once that is done, I can then build the course, or I can start working on the course. The course itself will be not on Twitch, obviously. It'll probably be on YouTube, on the How to Code Well channel, and then I'll put it all together and give it off to FreeCodeCamp. So this stream is essentially me showing you the design process, the decision process of building this framework. And I admit it's certainly not the usual content that I put on the How to Code Well channel, because this is making mistakes, just showing the way a web developer would usually work. There's a bit of testing as well. I'm certainly not going to go into any great detail in the sort of the training space of what I'm actually doing. I'm just showing you as I work. So what we're going to do today is we're going to follow on from, I think, Monday, where we left off, where we had the validators in place. And if I just do a little quick recap, if I can find the right screen. So we left it where the bootstrap file, which is in src helper and then kernel bootstrap. Here we go. This is the process in which we're sort of working down. So we have the root data here, and the root data is coming off of the app config routing. So that's just a big PHP array that we've got like so. And then after that, we had a set of validations. So we had a set of validators, and we were setting those validators to the validation class. These validators will validate the patterns, the controller, and the action within the routing mechanism here. And as I've just noticed, we don't actually have the method going in there, but I'll add that in later. So we have where are we? In the HTTP class in validation, we have different types of validators for those things. So these are going to validate these values within each of these routes. And then after that, on the bootstrap file, we had the root factory, where we were instantiating a new factory, we were making those routes, and then we were validating those routes like so. Excuse me. So that's where we had left off. So we're in a good place. All the unit tests are working. I'll just run those just to double check. You should always double check your unit tests when you come in and work on a project, just to make sure that nothing has broken without you expecting it. So I'll do those in just a second. But what I would like to do today is, once those unit tests have passed, is to work through the locator. Now, the locator is something that I mentioned on Monday, and that locator will locate the designated route based upon the current URI, the query string that the user has passed. So we're going to do, unfortunately, a little bit of regex today, but it shouldn't be too tedious. So I'm going to just quickly, I started playing with this a couple of moments before the stream. So I set all the containers running, and let's see if I have this on my path. I probably do. Yep. So I'm just going to run the unit tests, and we have 30 tests, and they've all passed, so that's good. This is good. This is always good to sort of give you that little bit of confidence before you start actually writing code. So I know that everything is working as we have expected it to. So the next thing I'm going to do then is actually start writing some failing tests for the locator. So what I'm kind of thinking is that locator would be a folder within the HTTP, and that would have a locator class. So it would be locator locator.php, and that locator will take the roots, and it will also take the query string. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm just gonna refresh myself. We created this request as well last week, so that request will mimic that that query string, because I think what we do is we pass in the query string. Yeah, we do, like so, in this constructor method. So that sets the path and sets the method. And setting the path, I believe, uses the parse URL to parse that out, and we get the path like so. Okay, that's good. That's good. Okay. Okay, so that's set up. So we need to pass in the roots and the request. Okay, so in tests, in unit, in helper, in HTTP, let's just create a new directory, and we're going to call this locator. And then we're just going to create a new, well, what I'll do just for ease is I'll just copy the request and put it in there, like locator. I'm not sure if you can see these being displayed upon the page. These are PHP Storm has a series of windows that pop out, and I don't think you can actually see them on the stage on the screen. But what I've done here is I've created a locator test.php, and we're going to fill this out. So this is a copy of the request test. So I'm just going to delete all of that, and we're going to test the default locator. And with the default, what I'm thinking of doing is we're going to have, let's just set that to be locator, like so, is I think I'm going to supply the roots, and I haven't spelled that right, locator, there we go. I think I'm going to supply the request, obviously, and the roots. So if I go back to the bootstrap file, let's have a look at how that is being set up. So I want to go back to src helper kernel and then bootstrap.php. So yeah, roots is off of the back of the root factory. That returns an array. So I need to pass in a request, which is the request object that we've decided, and we also need to return or pass in an array of roots. So let's do that. So on locator test, we need to pass in the request and the roots. Okay. So this is going to be the array of roots, and this is going to be a new request. Like so. And what are we going to do on after we've created the locator? Well, we're going to have a method called locate, which will do the location, will do the transformation, if you will, of the root and the request. We're going to do the processing of that. But I'm not too sure whether we need to actually return anything here. So I'm just sort of thinking this through as I go. So I think that, I mean, we got locate, and that would return the root. So we could do an asset empty locate. So that, or asset false, because we don't have anything in here that matches that. So we're going to ascertain that that is false by default, because there's nothing in these two things. In fact, what I could do is just set these to null, like so. Let's just run this and see if there's a... Well, it's going to fail because obviously this hasn't been set up. As you can see here, well, first of all, it can't find the locator. So let's go and create that class. So in here, let's create the locator, and then we'll have a new class. Whoops. Let's just copy the request, put that in there, change that to be locator, and then grab, change the name of that, change the name of this, and then we're not going to worry about any of this. We're going to have a method called locate. So this is going to be a public function locate, and that will return a Boolean. Well, no, it will return either it will return a root or null. So it will return a root or null. The constructor we need to supply, we've decided upon an array, which is roots, and we're going to set that to a blank array, and we're going to put in the request object. So the request object we need first. And that's going to be the request. And let's just tidy this up because that doesn't make any sense now. Oops. So that's going to return either null or a root. So we need to change that test down here because we're asserting false. So we need to do assert. Is it assert? I could do empty. Is there a null to actually make sure it is null? Yep. Okay, so undefined class locator. What I can do is let's just remove that, and then good old PHP Storm will be able to find it for me. There we go. So the required parameter request is missing, so I need to create a request. This one. And the query string, we're going to just do a /. And the method we're going to set to get. And we're going to pass that in. Now, we are not supplying any of the roots here. And this is why we want to trigger this to return null. So that's fine. Should there be anything that happens once the constructor runs? Well, obviously we need to set those variables, but let's just run this and see what happens here. So that still fails, and this is because return value of locator locate must be an instance of a root or null, and none is returned. This is because I've returned a void. So in, where are we? Locator here. I'm not actually returning anything at all. Okay, so we need to build out that mechanism. So let's set these things. So the first thing we need to do is set a private request, and a private routes, and this is going to be the request up here. These are going to be an array like so, and what we're going to do is we're just going to set those. So this routes is equal to routes, and before that we had this request is equal to request. Okay, so we've set those private things, which is good, which means that we can build this out now. So I'm just going to fill that out because it's going to return null or root. I don't know about you, but this is just a little personal quirk of mine. This here, this return statement doesn't match this. I mean, it does match this, right? But what we're saying here is it's returning root or null. Here we're saying it returns null or root. So I would prefer it if PHP Storm put the null on the left-hand side of the root, because that matches. Whenever I see a question mark, a colon question mark, that to me is like it will return null or it will return root, right? So I know it's just I'm just being very, very pedantic, but when I look at this in a glance, I expect these to match up, and they're not. But that's just me. Okay, so now we have the request, and now we have the routes. The first thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we have routes. So let's do if this routes. So we're going to do if false. Well, we'll do if empty routes, because it will be empty. Then we need to do something. So that's the first thing we need to check. Make sure that there are routes, and we probably at this point would throw an exception, or we would just return null. I mean, I guess that would be return null, because I mean that would throw a 404, I guess, in this instance. And then what we would do is, so at this point we do this request. We've got get path, so that would be the path of the request. I'm just going to set this to a local variable. That would therefore be the query string. We then need to loop over the this routes as root. Then we would need to check and make sure that the instance of root, so if root is an instance of root. Now I just want to double check something after I do this, because I had a thought last night as to how we might be able to get around this instance of malarkey. So I'm wondering if we can do, and this is just me blue sky thinking here, but I'm wondering if we can do, if we can change this to be an array of roots. Is that, I've seen that happen before, and probably not. No, I was just thinking out loud there. Okay, so we do a check to make sure that it is an instance of root, and I guess if this is false, we also return null, maybe. Although the more I'm doing this, the more I dislike doing this. Let's have a slurp of my tea. So then what we need to do is we need to do a preg match based on, and I can't remember what that is, how that works. So let's, it's pattern and then subject. I always get these muddled, and then flags and matches. I always get the the order of the arguments of this the signature wrong. So the pattern in this case is actually the query string. Sorry, no, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. The pattern in this case is the root get pattern. And I think I'm going to need to do this within here because I need to have the ability of finding out what root is. So I'm probably going to push this off to another method. I'll refactor this once it's done. So this code is going to look a bit terrible at first. So the first thing is the pattern, and that is off of the root. The next thing is the subject, so that's going to be the query string that we pass in. We're also going to create a variable called matches because that will be used to work out the groupings of bits and pieces. So that's cool. So this, what do you return here? So we return an init, an int, or false. Preg match returns 1 if the pattern matches the given subject, 0 if it doesn't, or false if an error occurred. So we're either looking for a 1 or a false in this case, or 0. So let's see if we can work that through. I mean, you could put this in within its own if statement, but that's going to be a bit sort of manky. So I'm just going to do match. No, we've already got matches. Matched. Or no, let's keep away from matched. The word match. Let's do found. That's probably better, isn't it? Let's just bring this down to make a little bit of room. Whoops. Okay, and then so we can do if found, because this is either going to return false if it's not found. It's going to return 1 if it is found, which is true, or it's going to return 0 if there is an error. So if found, oops, what's going on with my? Okay, so if found, we've now found that particular root based on the query string that we've passed in via the path. This is all looking a little bit manky. We're doing all sorts of crazy things here. First of all, we're checking whether or not there are any roots, and then we are looping through the roots and checking that the roots is an instance of root. So this all needs to be split out and put into its own little own little methods. But let's just carry on. So if found, what are we going to do? Well, in this case, we're going to break because we've now found the root. So that will break out the for each loop, and then we can do if found, we can do found root, variable found root, whoops, is equal to the root that we found. Whoa, Magic Mouse is going crazy this morning. Okay, so we now have that, and what we can do up here is we can set found root is equal to null, because remember we are either returning null or we're returning the actual, if I can get the colon, we're either returning the found root or we're returning null. Okay, so now it's getting a little bit complicated, but here we can do return found root. So that will either be the found root or null, which we've set up there. Let's hit save. I'll deal with matches later on. That's no biggie. So this is kind of like the very minimalistic approach to this solution here, I think. However, it is getting a little, as you've noticed, it is getting a little bit messy. It's doing an awful lot of logical stuff in here. But let's run these tests, see what else is broken. So that's passed. Yeah. But let's just play this a little bit more. Let's put through some actual roots and see. So I'm going to go to the Locator test, and I can assure you that this is going to break because I haven't dealt with the delimiters of the actual regex. So let's do test valid root. So we're going to put in the query of invoice, and we're going to do 1, 2, 3. Okay. So that's going to get the invoice ID of 1, 2, 3. That's what we're trying to achieve here, and we can now do an instance. Oops, assert the instance of, and we pass in the instance of root. Whoops, yeah, that'll do. Okay, so locate should return the root of invoice 1, 2, 3. Oh, sorry, we will obviously need to pass in an array of roots. So let's do that. Now this is moving into less of a unit test and more of an integration test, because we're obviously integrating various components together rather than doing a single unit of work. So I do appreciate that we are moving the boundaries here of what unit tests are, but for this I'm just going to continue on. So roots is, well, let's do root is equal to new root, and it is, if I remember rightly, set pattern is something like invoice, and then I believe it's a group, and then it's 0 to 9, and we want as many of these as possible. There we go. Okay, the next one we're going to set is, let's put in a method, set methods of get. I'll worry about that in just a second, but I think that is all we need at this point. So we're just going to supply that in here as part of that array. So this should return true. However, I doubt it will, because like I said, the delimiters are wrong, but we'll get to that in just a second. So let's just run this and see if this breaks, which it does. Let's have a look at the problem here. So we have, yeah, preg match unknown modifier and that. So I think this is because of the delimiters. So let's go back to the locator here. Excuse me. So where we're doing the preg match, we're just basically dumping in this pattern. And the pattern in this case is in the test is just this. Well, that's not good regex at all. That's invalid regex. So what we need to do is we need to set a delimiter. So I think what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to put in a constant, and we're going to call this, well, actually, hang on a minute. We're going too far. Let's do preg match. Yeah, okay, so we are going to do a constant. Sorry, I was just checking the spelling of that. So we're going to do a constant of DAE, LIMITER, delimiter, and we're going to set this to be a delimiter of hash. And we can now do preg match self : delimiter, and then pattern. So this is going to get quite long. So let's just bring this out. Well, I tell you what, let's just continue. I'll bring it out in a minute. So whoops, like that. Okay, so I don't think this is going to work because we haven't designated the caret or the dollar symbol either. So we can, well, let's just run this and see if there's anything changed. So yeah, that does work. But I don't think that is good regex, because we need to put a caret at the front and a dollar symbol at the end. However, this is getting rather lengthy. We know that this actually passes. I'm going to just do that now. I'm just going to put in the caret at the front. and then it is here. We're going to put a dollar symbol there. Okay, because that's the start of the pattern. That's the end of the pattern. So we're just going to save, run those tests again. Hopefully they'll work. They are. Okay, now I think it's, so we know that we found the root based on that thing, and that's pretty good. I'm going to create another one just quickly, just to give myself a little bit more confidence. So we're going to do valid. We're going to do test. Invoice ID. We're also going to do another one here. We're going to do test invoice edit, because we want to do edit like that. So that's 1, 2, 3, and then / edit. So this is checking again that this is valid. So let's hit save, run those again. Okay, so we're now at 33. So yeah, that has passed, which is good. So let's let's do a little bit of refactoring here, because this is looking rather awful. Look at that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to handle the way in which well, let's start from the top and work our way down. So we're setting found root as null. Okay, that's sort of acceptable at this point. We're then checking the roots. So I would like to think that we have roots here. Now I could pass in an array and actually force it to be an array, or I could do a check to make sure that there is the passed in roots are not empty. So I could do that up there. So this is where I could do. I could do if empty roots, and I could throw an exception perhaps at this point. However, I'm not sure about throwing exceptions on constructors. That might be a bit of an anti-pattern code smell type affair. So I'm wondering if we need to have a method that the locate calls to do the validation to make sure that there are roots and other bits and pieces. Or do we throw an exception in the constructor? That would be the easiest thing. So if the roots are empty, then we would throw an exception. But then you have to think, well, would there ever be a point where this locator class needs to be called where we don't have any roots, and then we perhaps set the roots to the locator class and use a setter? So that kind of decision process. I think what I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to throw an exception in here. So throw new exception, and we're just going to go roots requires roots is empty. Now, the problem with this, of course, is that I have a unit test that requires empty roots to be added. So I'm wondering now, perhaps I do need to have a setter method. Let's, although I would still need to check that. Going round in circles now, aren't I? So maybe I need to have a protected method that the locate method calls upon to check that. I'm not a fan of throwing it in the constructor, because that limits the way the constructor can be used. Let's put in a setter method. So public function set roots, which is an array. So here we can say that we don't supply any empty bits and pieces. And in fact, what we could do, yeah, okay, I've got an idea. So public function set roots, array roots. And then what we do here is we say this roots is equal to, whoops, roots, and then we return this. Okay. So now we can set those roots through that, and so this is going to retrieve those roots. That's fine. We know it's always going to be an array. So, and to be honest, if there isn't, if it is empty, then it's just going to throw a 404. So I'm wondering if this is a non-error. So let's just do this. Set roots is roots. Okay, so that will set the roots. You're passing in a blank empty array, which is okay. And then, because if this returns null, then we've got a problem. So we don't need to worry too much about that check for this stage. However, we do need to tidy this up as well, because this is a bit of a mess. So let's create a method that deals with this preg and returns a match or not. So let's do that. I want a method that deals with this junk here. So I want to have a protected method that that is called create pattern. And this puts in all of this gumph in here. So this is pattern is equal to you. We will obviously need to supply the actual root itself. And we can return that instead of and that returns a string. Now, this is actually looking a little bit like a utility method rather than a normal method. So I'm going to actually set this to be public static. I'm setting it public because I can test it easier. So let's do self create pattern, putting in the root. Okay, so that's looking a little bit better already. So here we can test the pattern. If we wanted to, we could go back to the locator here, locator test, and we could do a test pattern, and we could do a test on all of this. So we could do something like, well, first of all, before I do that, let me just run those tests. They all pass. That's good. So we do test pattern create. Which I should have done before I actually did any of this. So we're going to need to supply the request. That's fine. But we don't need to supply the root in this case, because that we've allowed that to be just empty. But we will need to do locator create pattern. The pattern we're going to do is we're going to supply the root. So that's what we put in here. And then that should return. So if we did same, so that in theory should return something like this. Let's do pattern up here. New locator. Let's see. It should be 2 hashes. Oops, that's not a hash. 2 hashes, a caret, a dollar symbol, and then this needs to be the root. Actually, not the request. Sorry. Root. And that doesn't take any parameters, but we do have root set pattern, and the pattern is going to be the very same as this one, just to keep it in check. I'll deal with that in just a second, and then create pattern based on the root. Locator, create pattern, and then because it's static, we don't even need to instantiate it, which is fine. So locator, create pattern, and root, and that should therefore be the same as this. Okay, which it is. Okay, so we can create patterns, and we can so that's cool. So that's reaffirmed that refactoring that is working as expected. Okay, next thing. Here what we're doing is we're checking whether or not there is a root, and we should always do this whenever you're looping through an array of objects, because there could be different objects, of course. So it's always good to check that. Also, it gives you some the ability to, in your IDE, to know what those variables represent, which I find incredibly handy. But it's a very messy, because you've got for each if and then an if here, so it is quite messy. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this section out, and we're just going to create another public function, and we're going to call this what are we going to call this? Find root. And we're going to pass in the root that we would like to check. So I need to get my naming conventions right here, because this is going to be a bit awkward. So this is root to check. It's not really root to check, is it? It's not really find root now. It's check root. Or well, it's okay. Find. It's not find root. You're passing in a root to find. Oh dear, naming things is difficult in programming. Find root. Let's just keep it that. It's not going to be that. And then that requires a root. We're going to return a root if the root is found. So let's do found root. And then put that in here instead. So for each, we don't need to check the instance, because we are requiring that root. So found root is now root check. We don't need to do a break at this point. We just need to do the preg. It's getting a bit complicated now, because we need the query string too. Okay, let's do for each roots as root. Let's do found root is equal to this find root, passing in the roots that we want to check, and the query string that we need to check against. And we can therefore do if found root is an instance of root, then we break, and then we return. That to me looks a little bit more cleaner, although the naming conventions are completely wrong. Let's just pass in the string here. Oh no, that's the wrong method. Locate. Here we go, find root. We need to have a string, and we're passing in the query string. So this is really the guts of it. And then at this point we can just do return of that. Now I know I've screwed up with the matches. The matches needs to go somewhere, but we will worry about that when we need to. But this is a nice sort of succinct pattern. So I guess we could call this pattern match, because it is a pattern match. So if pattern match returns this pattern match root, and then there we go. So I'm kind of slowly refactoring this to make it a little bit more better. In fact, we can go one step further, can't we? Because what we're doing here is we're pulling out the query string. Why should pattern match require an instance of... No, because we do need that. Okay, that's fine. All right, that's fine. No problem. That's fine. So I was going to just pull out the pattern off the root and do all that, but let's not overcomplicate ourselves. So let's run the test, see if they have broken, which they are. There's two issues here. What's going on? So return type pattern match must be an instance of root, but an integer is returned. So yeah, that is not good. Why is that? We're passing in the root. So we could do at this point, we could do check and then if check. Whoa. So we could do if check, then we return the root. So we do root to check. Found root is equal to null. Found root is equal to the root that we've supplied. And then we return found root. Now the problem, and then that would be like that. So the problem here is that I've called this pattern match. We should call this root match. Let's run that and see what's going on. That's passed. That's all good. So we're doing a root match, passing that in, and then we get the found root, checking the instance of the root. If that's the case, we break, and then we return the found root based off of the root match. So this now is less of a locate method and more of a process method, because this is running the process of this, doing the for each loop and stuff. This is more the locate method, but let's just keep it like this. I don't want to faff about with too much of the naming conventions. So we've managed to do that. That's pretty cool. We need to work on the matches and how we're going to deal with the matches at some point, because they are obviously going to be the values that we are supplying down. So I might instead return an array where we have the found root and potentially the matches or something. I don't know. Or I could set the matches to the root or something like like that. I don't know. I need to work that through in my head. But this is looking good. This is looking very good. So let's. I don't think there's going to be any more complicated routes than this. We could try another one and see if it breaks. Let's try that one. So this is invoice, then the ID, then edit, and I'm not sure what that was going to be. But we could. This could be invoice ID, and then item, and then the ID of the item. Maybe. Let's try that. I'm trying to use this as in real world sort of scenario. So let's do a locator test. Let's just bring this back to give us a little bit of room. So this is invoice item edit. So this is invoice ID, that's the ID, then that's the item, and then the item of the ID of the item. So we do another set of these things. So 0 to 9, and then douche, and then we're going to do, let's do edit. So we pass in 1, 2, 3 item. Let's do 4, 5, 6, and then edit. Something like that. Maybe that'll be a route. I don't know. We'll see. So valid. So test. Invoice. Item edit. Okay, let's run this. That's passed. So yeah, that is that's good. That's pushing the boundaries of the most complicated routes. I think that will be enough. And one thing we haven't tested, of course, is that what we're doing is we're only passing in one route. What happens if we pass in two routes? So let's do route 1 and route 2. Can we distinguish between multiple routes? So let's do route. Oh, sorry, that should be route 1. That should be route 2. Let's do invoice blah 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 blah. Change that to be not valid. Okay, so we should skip the not valid one and we should get the edit one. So just like this. And we're going to supply route 1 and we're going to supply route 2. So even though these are, yeah, so we should get this one here. Although we are only checking the root class, so I will do a little bit more checking in just a minute. So that's cool. Let's run this and see if that has worked. So let's just make sure that the right root is actually returned. So so we do locate. So what I can do here is I can do found root is equal to this one here. Whoops, no. There we go, found root. So first of all, we make sure that that is the right instance, which we all know is good. Then what we do is we check whether or not we do assert same, and we check the expected root. The expected root is the request. Well, sorry, no, it's this, isn't it? That's the expected one. And so that's found root. Let's just make this a little smaller. Oops, wrong button. And it's get pattern. Okay, hopefully that will now, because what we're doing is we're passing in two routes. This is all looking very complicated now, but we're passing in two routes, and we are wanting to push this request through, and we want to match. We want to locate this route, this route. right? So that should match this, yeah? Okay. And it does. So there we go. We've got 47 assertions, 35 tests. So yeah, this is slowly building up my confidence with this application. It's certainly not going to be anywhere near production ready once it's done. My tea is, yeah, that's cold. So it certainly won't be production ready once it's done, but it will allow me to create routes for the invoicing app fairly easily and quickly once I have this framework built. And I think we're getting there. I think the next stage is to push the route to once we've got the found route, we can now push that to the designated controller, to the designated action within that controller, and then render that page. And then at that point, we should have finished the routing part of this application. There are a couple of unknowns that I want to work through. First of all, I want to make sure that I can actually get the matched components. So I need to handle somehow the matches. This is why I added the matches in. But I need to somehow bring them back to the found route. And I might actually even set those to the found route or to the request, maybe. But it is working as expected, which is great. And we've did a little bit of preg, which is always nice to do on a morning. But anyway, I need to crack on. I need to start the rest of my day. And continue on with some other paid work. But if you're new to this, then I appreciate this is a little bit more in depth than perhaps the other tutorials I've done. This is not a beginner's video at all. This isn't. I don't even class this as a tutorial. This is just me writing code and coming up with problems and solutions live. This certainly won't be production ready. I certainly won't be using this with any of my freelance clients. I'm a freelance dev. This is just a framework that I'm putting together just so I can build something for the invoicing application that I'm doing for FreeCodeCamp. Once this is all done, I will then break each of these up into smaller components and build a proper tutorial course and then give that to FreeCodeCamp, put that onto my channel as well. That process, that building of the course, or developing the course, won't be on Twitch because that's a different type of content. Because at this stage, I don't really know. I don't know how I'm going to pass back matches, right? I don't know how I'm going to do that. And this Twitch stream is demonstrating the process of actually coming up with that solution. When I do the tutorials, I already know what the solutions are before I start the tutorial. So it's a different mindset. It's a different way of doing this. So I do appreciate that this isn't the usual stuff I do. But anyway, bye. On Friday we have a podcast, so that is on Spotify, iTunes, and other podcast players, plus the How to Code Well YouTube channel. So do check that out. Every Friday I interview someone from the web development or programming community or part of the industry. So I've spoken to hiring managers, I've spoken to course leaders, I've spoken to Kimberly Cook from CodeBar, I've spoken to junior developers just coming into the role and senior developers who've had lots and lots of experience in web development and in programming. So do check that out. That's the How to Code Well podcast. So just put in How to Code Well in your podcast player and you'll find that. So that's coming out on Friday. We've got a new one on Friday, which is awesome. But I'm not too sure when the next stream will be. But I'll let you know if you want to be. If you're interested, do subscribe and follow along, and also follow me on Twitter because I'll put the updates on there. But anyway, I must dash. I need to get some more more tea because that's nice and cold. But thanks for watching. Happy coding, everyone. I'll see you again soon. Cheers. Bye.